Victoria's manicured fingers, instruments of pure malice, slid the forged documents across the gleaming mahogany table. Her lawyer, Finch, whose soulless eyes matched his fees, gave a curt nod. "Indeed, Miss Sterling," Finch intoned, his voice a low purr. The finalized submission for the mediator. It clearly outlines Miss Chen's documented instabilities and contrasts them with your own exemplary maternal record. The argument is compelling. "I foresee no significant obstacles, Miss Sterling." Victoria graced him with a small reptilian smile. "Excellent, Finch. Mr. Henderson must understand the stark reality. Lily's safety and stability are my only concern. And my sister's issues, well, they seem to be worsening, don't they? The same fabricated poison. The exact strategy that dismantled my career 3 years prior, now re-aimed with cold precision at my custody of Lily. The injustice was of physical weight. The metallic tang of betrayal flooded my mouth. Again. I watched Victoria perform her Oscar-worthy melodrama for Mr. Henderson, who looked like he'd rather be auditing the IRS. "Oh, Mr. Henderson," Victoria began, voice catching, "you can't imagine the torment. Maya's fabrications, they're relentless. She paints me as unfit, tells Lily awful, twisted things about me. She even told Lily I don't really love her. Can you believe such cruelty? She said I only care about money, my own daughter hearing such poison." Her lower lip trembled. My hands were fists under the table. But rage was a luxury. Instead, cold clarity cut through the red mist. "Calculate, Maya. Don't mourn. Calculate." She was playing her old game, expecting old reactions. She had no idea. Mr. Henderson sighed, the sound of a man drowning in disputes. "Miss Sterling, if you have new evidence of recent behavior impacting Miss Lily's immediate welfare—" "New evidence?" Victoria scoffed delicately. "Her entire demeanor is evidence. She's trying to turn my daughter against me with insidious whispers. Is that not impact enough?" My fingers tingled, but the trembling stopped. The calculation continued, smooth and cold. "Oh, Victoria," I thought, a humorless smile playing internally. "You stand there, spewing your well-rehearsed lies, so convinced of your brilliance. You think you can run the same pathetic play twice and expect me to just fall apart?" The arrogance was stunning. "But you've made one tiny, catastrophic miscalculation, sis." My mental smile widened. "This courthouse, this stage, it's mine. Every camera, every microphone, all mine. For 18 meticulous months, while you polished your halo, I was buying the whole damn theater." Yes, she had no idea. And that ignorance was her undoing. My acquisition of the courthouse security company wasn't just business, it was a trap. The custody hearing Victoria so smugly anticipated was 16 hours away. Tick-tock. I could see her preening, rehearsing her victim statement, picking an outfit that screamed grieving mother. She was utterly convinced she'd already won, that I was the same shattered woman from 3 years ago. Too broken to fight. The sheer hubris almost made me laugh. She imagined me slinking away defeated while she waltzed off with Lily. Little did she know the game had changed. The board was mine. Pieces were in motion for a different outcome. Cold resolve solidified within me. Enough performance. Enough of Victoria's toxic play. It was time for the curtains on a different show one, where she was the unsuspecting star of her own downfall. My fingers, steady now, found my phone. Marcus, my ally, my strategist, who knew every detail of our counteroffensive. His name on my contact list was a beacon. I typed the brief message, the culmination of 18 months of planning, patience, and simmering rage. My thumb hovered over send for a fraction of a second, a tiny moment of stillness. Then I pressed it. A single, concise text. It's time. Victoria was mid-flow, her voice a carefully modulated blend of sorrow and saintly patience, painting me as a villainous, one carefully chosen adjective at a time. "And that, Mr. Henderson, is precisely why Lily's current stable environment with me is paramount," she declared, her gaze sweeping towards the mediator with an air of profound maternal wisdom. "She needs to be shielded from her mother's obvious, and frankly, escalating issues of judgment and emotional stability. Right, that's my cue. Had enough of this crap." I stood abruptly, the scrape of my chair legs echoing like a gunshot in the suddenly hushed mediation room. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched in momentary surprise, her monologue stuttering to a halt. Finch, her legal Rottweiler, looked up from his meticulously organized papers, a flicker of annoyance in his usually impassive eyes. Even Mr. Henderson seemed startled from his habitual state of weary resignation. "Mr. Henderson, forgive my rather dramatic interruption," I began, my voice calm, cutting through the lingering miasma of Victoria's bullshit. I offered a small, pointed smile in my sister's direction. But before Miss Sterling continues her rather compelling work of fiction, Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What are you playing at, Maya?" "I'm invoking my right, Mr. Henderson," I continued, addressing the mediator directly, "to present new, highly pertinent, and quite frankly game-changing evidence at tomorrow's custody hearing. Evidence that has only just become available to me and which bears directly and rather significantly on this case." Finch shot to his feet, his chair scraping back almost as loudly as mine had. "Objection! Mr. Henderson, this is an outrage, a blatant ambush tactic. Miss Chen has had months to prepare her case. What possible game-changing evidence could she magically produce now that couldn't have been presented through the established proper channels? This is a mockery of due process." Mr. Henderson held up a hand, a gesture that barely contained the burgeoning chaos. "One moment, please. Order. Miss Chen, this is indeed unorthodox, to say the least, at this late stage." Victoria, recovering quickly from her initial shock, let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Her face, moments before a mask of concerned motherhood, was now paling, but her eyes flashed with a familiar, venomous anger. "Evidence! Don't be absolutely ridiculous, Maya. You have nothing. This is just another one of your desperate, pathetic stunts to cause drama and delay the inevitable." She waved a dismissive hand as if swatting away an annoying fly. "You're flailing, and frankly, it's embarrassing to watch." Finch, ever the loyal lapdog, chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Indeed, Mr. Henderson, this is a clear attempt to derail these proceedings, a frivolous and transparent tactic born of desperation. Miss Chen has consistently failed to substantiate any of her wild allegations. This 11th hour claim of new evidence is undoubtedly more of the same baseless theatrics we've come to expect." He puffed out his chest slightly. "We demand that she either substantiate this claim immediately with specifics or that this ridiculous interruption be dismissed and we proceed with the agreed agenda." I met Victoria's glare, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. Oh, the delicious irony. Desperate, Victoria? Am I the one who looks desperate right now? Take a look in a mirror, sis. Your true colors are starting to show, and they're not nearly as flattering as that power suit. The slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hand as she clutched her pen didn't escape my notice. "Bingo. We'll see about that tomorrow, won't we?" I replied, my voice still even, locking eyes with Victoria. Her confident smirk was faltering, a tiny crack appearing in the flawless facade. "Some rather illuminating footage recently came to light. It's amazing what you can find when you know exactly where to look, and more importantly, when to look." Victoria's pallor deepened. "Footage? What in God's name are you babbling about now, Maya? You're grasping at straws. You're inventing fantasies." Finch stepped forward again, his jowls practically quivering with indignation. "Mr. Henderson, I must insist. This is beyond irregular. It's prejudicial." "Footage? Of what precisely? Unless Miss Chen can provide concrete details this instant as to the nature and relevance of this alleged material, we will be filing a motion for sanctions for this blatant attempt to manipulate the court and harass my client." Mr. Henderson, to his credit, looked genuinely intrigued now, the weariness in his eyes replaced by a spark of keen interest. He leaned forward. "Miss Chen, while the timing is certainly unusual, the court always prioritizes any evidence that could be relevant, especially concerning the welfare of a child. What, broadly speaking, is the nature of this footage you refer to? And how did it just become available?" I kept my expression neutral, though inside a small cheer went up. "It directly pertains to Miss Sterling's conduct, her character, and her overall fitness as a parent, Mr. Henderson," I stated clearly. "Specifically, it sheds considerable light on her rather unorthodox methods of preparation for this very hearing. As for its recent availability, let's just say some systems have recently undergone significant upgrades for clarity and retention. I gave a subtle nod towards the general direction of the courthouse's own security cameras, a hint only I, and soon Marcus, would understand. Mr. Henderson steepled his fingers, his gaze fixed on me, then shifting to a visibly flustered Victoria and a sputtering Finch. After a moment that stretched taut with unspoken accusations and simmering panic, he delivered his ruling. Given the potential impact on the child involved and the serious implications of any evidence relating to a party's conduct in these proceedings, I will allow an emergency evidence review. Finch started to protest. But Mr. Henderson, the prejudice, the lack of... The mediator cut him off with a firm, "Counselor, I am mindful of all factors. However, the paramount concern here is the best interest of Lily. Therefore, the review will take place in my chambers at 6 a.m. tomorrow." He looked directly at me. "Miss Chen, you will provide a full, unedited copy of this evidence to Mr. Finch and his client by no later than 5 a.m., not a minute later. This will allow them a minimal but under the circumstances adequate window to view it prior to our meeting. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, Mr. Henderson," I replied, a wave of triumph washing over me. "Consider it done." 6 a.m.? Finch practically shrieked, his composure finally shattering. That's preposterous. It's completely insufficient time to analyze any substantial footage, let alone prepare a response. This is a travesty of fairness. "Don't worry so much, Finch," I said, unable to resist a final parting shot as I gathered my bag. "The footage is quite self-explanatory. I'm sure a sharp legal mind like yours will catch on very quickly. It's a real page-turner, or should I say, screen-grabber." The specific reel playing in my mind was crystal clear. Victoria, not looking so saintly now, huddled in a booth at a greasy diner down by the docks with my slimy ex-husband, David. The grainy courthouse camera footage, enhanced and clarified thanks to Marcus's genius, showed her sliding a thick envelope across the table to him. Her voice, captured with surprising clarity by the upgraded audio I'd insisted on, was unmistakable as she coached him, practically dictated his heartfelt testimony about my supposed failings as a mother and wife. "Just stick to the script, David, darling," her recorded voice cooed, "and there's plenty more where that came from." Oh, this was going to be so much better than I'd even hoped. Reveal number 1 was queued up and ready to roll. The tension in the mediation room had been thick enough to spread on toast, but the atmosphere in the sterile courthouse hallway afterwards was pure Arctic chill. As I made my way towards the elevators, a hiss from behind me stopped me in my tracks. "Maya!" I turned to see Victoria, her face a mask of cold fury. Finch hovering nervously a few paces behind her like a butler at a murder scene. Her earlier theatrical distress had vanished, replaced by the raw, unfiltered venom I knew so well. She stalked towards me, her expensive heels clicking ominously on the polished linoleum. "You listen to me, you conniving little bitch!" she spat, her voice low and dangerous, all pretense of the grieving mother abandoned. "You are bluffing. You have nothing on me. That pathetic stunt in there, trying to intimidate me with some vague thread of footage? You're more delusional than I thought." I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "Is that genuine fear I hear in your voice, Victoria? It's a new look for you. After all these years of your meticulously crafted performances, it's almost refreshing to see something authentic, even if it is abject terror." Her eyes narrowed into slits. "I will destroy you for this, Maya. I swear to God I will make you regret the day you were born. You think you're so clever with your little tricks and your imaginary footage? I have friends, Maya, powerful friends. People who can make your life a living hell with a single phone call. This will blow up in your face so spectacularly, you won't know what hit you." "Bring them on, Victoria," I replied, my voice as cool and steady as hers was frayed. "I'm actually looking forward to meeting them. Perhaps they'd be interested in seeing your performance as well. The unedited director's cut, so to speak." I pressed the elevator button. "See you bright and early at 6 a.m. Try to get some sleep. You look a little unraveled. And stress is so bad for the complexion, isn't it?" The elevator doors slid open, a welcoming escape. The adrenaline from the mediation showdown had mostly worn off, replaced by a grim sense of purpose and far too much lukewarm coffee. It was well past 9 p.m., and the courthouse security office, my newly acquired nocturnal headquarters, was quiet save for the hum of servers and the click of my keyboard. I was knee-deep in archived footage, a digital rabbit hole that went back months, cross-referencing access logs with camera angles, painting a much larger, uglier picture of Victoria's manipulations than just her little tete-a-tete with my ex-husband, David. I had Marcus on the line, his calm voice a welcome anchor. So, Henderson actually bought it? The 6 a.m. evidence review? Marcus sounded pleased. Finch must have aged 10 years and 10 minutes. Victoria's probably back at her five-star hotel, stress-eating artisan chocolates and plotting my early demise. Or shredding incriminating documents, I chuckled, scrolling through a particularly damning entry log. The package for Finch, the best of reel of Victoria and David being cozy at the diner, is burning to a USB as we speak. He'll get it by 5 a.m., as promised. But Marcus, there's so much more here. A clear pattern of her meeting with, let's just say, persons of interest connected to court personnel, off-site, very cloak and dagger. This goes deeper than just bribing David. Figured as much, he said. Victoria doesn't do things by halves, especially when her good name is on the line. Keep digging, but don't forget to... I cut him off, my eyes glued to the main arrivals monitor. Marcus, hold that thought. You are not going to believe this. Speak of the devil and she doth appear, complete with her legal stooge and a new, rather shifty-looking character I don't recognize. What's happening? Marcus's voice sharpened. Victoria, Finch, and some guy built like a brick outhouse and carrying a hefty-looking technician's bag just waltzed into the courthouse lobby. I narrated, my heart rate kicking up a notch. It's nearly 10 o'clock at night, Marcus. What in the seven hells are they doing back here? Can't imagine they're here for a late-night civics lesson, Marcus quipped, his tone now all business. Where are they heading? I watched, a knot tightening in my stomach, as the trio on my primary monitor bypassed the main elevators and headed towards a service corridor. They're in the West Wing, heading towards the records annex. No, they just veered off. Server room. They're making a beeline for the main courthouse server room, Marcus. The technician, Ronnie, as I'd later learn his name was, hefted his bag, its contents suddenly looking a lot more ominous. This cannot be good. That room houses everything, every digital record, every security log, every byte of data this courthouse generates. A muffled snippet of audio crackled through from a motion-activated corridor microphone near their position, one of the many subtle upgrades Marcus and I had implemented. Technician, Ronnie. Main access panel should be just inside this stairwell, less monitored. Finch, voice tight with nerves. Are you absolutely certain no one will detect this intrusion, Miss Sterling? The night custodian usually makes his rounds around this time. Victoria, voice like ice chips. He's been persuaded to take an early night. His sick grandmother suddenly needed him. Just get it done, both of you. My blood ran cold. Marcus, you were right, I whispered into the phone, my eyes wide. They're going to try and wipe the servers. She must have realized my footage comment meant the courthouse's own system. The arrogant fool thinks she can just erase it all. Stay put, Maya, Marcus's voice was firm, devoid of panic. Do not engage them directly. I'm closer than you think. Keep your eyes on them. Keep feeding me intel. They're walking right into our hands. His confidence was infectious, settling my nerves just enough to keep my focus sharp. This was escalating faster than I'd imagined, but if Victoria was this desperate, it meant the diner footage had her truly spooked. The trio reached the unassuming, reinforced door of the server room. The technician, Ronnie, produced a surprisingly sophisticated-looking bypass device from his bag, and, after a few tense moments, a soft click indicated the magnetic lock had disengaged. They slipped inside, oblivious to the dedicated camera covering that specific entry. Another one of Marcus's little enhancements. The audio from inside the server room, thanks to a small mic we'd planted near the main console during a routine maintenance check a month prior, came through with chilling clarity. Ronnie's voice was businesslike. Okay, Miss Sterling, Mr. Finch. This server array is, well, it's a beast. State-of-the-art, heavily redundant. Wiping everything indiscriminately would take many hours, probably trigger multiple remote alerts, and leave a massive, screaming digital footprint. What exactly are we targeting here? Be specific. Victoria, ever impatient, paced the small space like a caged panther. I don't give a damn about everything, Ronnie. Focus your efforts on the primary surveillance archives. I want you to delete everything from the past 6 months, every camera feed, every audio log associated with the courthouse's internal and external security. Everything. Is that understood? Finch, looking even more green around the gills than usual, wrung his hands. 6 months? Victoria, are you certain? That's an incredibly broad stroke. What if her alleged footage is older, or heaven forbid, more recent than today? 6 months, Finch, will cover the period she's most likely to have anything remotely damaging on my necessary preparations with David, Victoria snapped, her voice tight with controlled fury. And it will also cover anything from this afternoon's little debacle, and certainly tonight's proactive system maintenance. If she has something ancient, it'll be irrelevant, easily discredited. This is the critical window. So, Ronnie, she turned back to the technician, her tone shifting from irritation to a chilling sort of command. Can you make all of that disappear? Make it look like a catastrophic system glitch? A random power surge? An act of a particularly clumsy deity? I don't care how you label it, just make it gone, permanently. Ronnie stroked his chin, eyeing the humming racks of servers. A targeted deletion of that magnitude, masked as a systemic failure. It's complex, ma'am, but within my capabilities. Extremely risky, though. These systems have deep internal logs, off-site replication, encrypted audit trails. Victoria waved a dismissive hand. Which you will also take care of, won't you, mister? It's Ronnie, ma'am, the technician supplied. And yes, for the substantial revised compensation we discussed for this emergency call-out, I will endeavor to make it as clean a digital sweep as possible. No promises it'll be invisible to a determined forensic analyst, but it should certainly muddy the waters beyond any reasonable doubt for a hastily scheduled 6 a.m. review. Finch, who had been shifting nervously from foot to foot, finally found his voice, albeit a shaky, reedy version of it. Victoria, I must strongly advise against this course of action. This is blatant destruction of evidence, spoliation of the highest order. If we are caught and the risks are astronomical, Ronnie's reassurances notwithstanding, the penalties are severe. For both of us, this could mean disbarment for me, substantial fines, even actual jail time for you. Is whatever Maya thinks she has truly worth this level of extreme jeopardy? Ronnie, to his credit, chimed in. He's not wrong, ma'am. If this goes sideways, tampering with federal courthouse servers, they don't just slap your wrist. They throw away the key, and then they forget where they put the damn key. He looked pointedly at Victoria. My fee reflects that considerable risk, and it's payable up front, by the way. Cash, as agreed. Victoria actually laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound that held no humor, only contempt. Oh, Finch, you really are a pathetic little worrier, aren't you? And Ronnie, your fee is already in your account as of 10 minutes ago. Check it if you must, but then get to work. She ran a perfectly manicured hand through her hair. Honestly, the pair of you. She then turned, her back to the main camera I was watching, but her voice carried clearly, laced with that familiar, chilling arrogance. We won't be caught, you pair of quivering incompetents. Who, precisely, is going to catch us? The night security guard I had detained with a fabricated family emergency? The courthouse IT department that's notoriously understaffed and reactive, not proactive. She paused, and I could almost feel her sneer. And as for Maya? Another brittle laugh. Please, that girl is a walking emotional wreck. She's too broken, too fundamentally fragile to fight back properly. She might have stumbled onto some tiny, insignificant piece of something, but she lacks the steel, the cunning, to leverage it effectively. She'll be a blubbering, incoherent mess by that 6 a.m. meeting, mark my words. This, she waved a hand around the server room, is simply tying up a loose end, ensuring her little fishing expedition comes up completely empty. It's damage control, Finch, not a declaration of war. Now, Ronnie, start deleting. I want to be out of here in an hour. The sheer, unadulterated gall. The breathtaking underestimation. Even after everything, She still saw me as that shattered, defeated woman from 3 years ago. A part of me should have been furious, but mostly I felt a cold, sharp thrill of anticipation. Oh, Victoria, you have no idea how wrong you are. Just as Ronnie's fingers hovered over the main console, a new voice cut through the sterile hum of the server room, amplified slightly by our hidden speaker and simultaneously echoing into the security office where I sat. That's where you're profoundly wrong, Victoria. Ronnie jumped back from the console as if it had suddenly burst into flames. Finch yelped, spinning around wildly. Victoria, however, merely stiffened, her head slowly turning towards the direction of the unexpected voice. Marcus stepped out of the shadowy alcove near the server room's emergency exit. An alcove I knew for a fact was a blind spot for any internal cameras they might have been aware of, but perfectly visible to my new system. He held a small external hard drive in his hand, its indicator light blinking a steady, reassuring blue. "You're wrong about Maya being broken," Marcus continued, his voice calm, authoritative, and carrying the distinct chill of someone who held all the cards. "She's the strongest damn woman I know, and you're definitely wrong about not getting caught trying to delete evidence from a federal courthouse server." He took another step into the room, his gaze locking onto Victoria's. "Because, you see, while Ronnie here is very good at deleting things, I'm even better at backing them up. In real time, as it happens. Every keystroke you were about to make, Ronnie. Every file you were about to wipe. It's all safe and sound right here." He hefted the drive. "And on several other redundant, off-site locations you couldn't find with a map and a magic wand." The cool night air filtering into the stuffy courthouse hallway from a strategically propped open emergency exit door did little to dispel the superheated tension that had just exploded. Victoria stood frozen, her face a mask of stunned disbelief, color draining away to leave her looking like a porcelain doll seconds before it shatters. Finch looked like he was about to either faint or be violently ill, his eyes darting between Marcus, the hard drive, and the server racks as if trying to calculate the sheer tonnage of legal trouble that had just landed on him. Ronnie, the technician, wisely raised his hands in a gesture of universal surrender, stepping well away from the console. What is the meaning of this?" Victoria finally stammered, her voice a hoarse whisper, all previous arrogance gone. "Who are you?" "I'm the guy who owns the company that really runs security in this courthouse, Miss Sterling," Marcus stated, his voice level. "And you, your lawyer, and your hired data wiper are currently trespassing in a restricted federal facility, attempting to tamper with evidence and conspiring to obstruct justice. All of which, by the way," he gestured vaguely to the ceiling, "has been beautifully recorded from multiple angles in high definition with crystal clear audio, including your delightful monologue about Maya being too broken to fight back." Just then, the server room door creaked open further, and two uniformed courthouse security guards, my guards, vetted and hired by Marcus, stepped in, their expressions grim and professional. "Miss Sterling, Mr. Finch, sir," one of the guards said, his voice polite but firm. "You'll need to come with us. There are a few irregularities we need to discuss downtown." Finch made a small, gurgling sound. Victoria, however, drew herself up, a flicker of her old fire returning. "This is an outrage. You can't possibly— I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent, Miss Sterling," Marcus said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "I'd strongly advise you to start exercising it, extensively." As the guards began to escort a now sputtering Victoria, a whimpering Finch, and a stoic Ronnie from the server room, my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. The text was short. "Phase 2 complete. Popcorn ready for 6 a.m. I couldn't help but grin. Oh yes, gallons of it. The image of Victoria's face, a cocktail of stunned disbelief and dawning horror, as the guards led her away, was going to be my new happy place. Finch had looked like he was about to confess to every crime committed since the Lincoln assassination just to make it stop. And Ronnie the technician simply looked resigned, like a man who knew he'd rolled the dice one too many times against a stacked deck. The heavy door of the security office clicked shut behind Marcus as he re-entered, a small, almost imperceptibly smug smile playing on his lips. He found me replaying the highlight reel of Victoria's grand exit on one of the monitors, a wide grin plastered across my own face. "Encore? Encore?" I quipped, hitting pause on Victoria's O face of utter ruination. My friend, that was not just phase 2 complete, that was a goddamn mic drop masterpiece. You, sir, are a maestro of mayhem. I finally let out the breath I felt like I'd been holding for 18 months, a shaky laugh bubbling up. I honestly thought for a second she was going to try and bribe the guards with her Amex Black Card. Marcus chuckled, pulling up a chair. She wouldn't have gotten far. Those guys are ex-military, hand-picked. Their loyalty isn't for sale, especially not to someone like her. He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. So, Ronnie the technician. He wasn't exactly a random variable in this equation, was he? I asked, my grin softening into genuine curiosity. His performance of surprise tech bro caught in the crossfire was a little too convincing for a first-timer. Marcus's smile widened. You always were a quick study, Maya. No, Ronnie wasn't random. Let's just say Miss Sterling isn't the only one who can do a little proactive networking. He leaned forward, his voice dropping conspiratorially. Remember when you first told me you suspected Victoria might try to discredit any digital evidence you brought forward, maybe even try a brute force hack on your personal accounts or something similarly clumsy? I nodded. That had been over a year ago, when the idea of buying the security company was just a wild, desperate seed of a plan. Well, Marcus continued, I figured if she was paranoid enough to consider that, she'd eventually get paranoid about the courthouse system itself, especially if she knew you were onto her. So I put out some very discreet feelers in the, let's call it the gray hat community, looking for someone with high-level server skills, an impeccable reputation for discretion, and perhaps a flexible moral compass when presented with a compelling enough argument, and compensation. Enter Ronnie, I surmised. Enter Ronnie, Marcus confirmed. Turns out, Ronnie had a bit of a history with a former associate of Victoria's who'd left him holding the bag on a rather messy corporate espionage gig a few years back. He wasn't exactly a fan of her broader social circle. When I approached him, explained the situation, a David versus Goliath scenario, a chance to see a particularly nasty piece of work get her comeuppance, plus a very generous retainer from an anonymous benefactor, he winked. He was surprisingly receptive. Took some convincing, a lot of safeguards put in place for his protection, but he agreed to be our inside man if Victoria ever made a move on the courthouse data. My jaw had practically hit the floor. For weeks? You're telling me Ronnie has been your contact, feeding you information for weeks? Pretty much since Victoria started making noises about wanting to understand the vulnerabilities of the courthouse's data retention policies, Marcus said, his expression smug. Ronnie was the one who reluctantly agreed to be her go-to guy for any sensitive digital issues. He's been forwarding us copies of their encrypted comms, her increasingly frantic inquiries after your little announcement in mediation today, her demands for an emergency consultation tonight. He even installed a few extra data sniffers on the network for us just to be sure we caught everything. Victoria didn't just walk into a trap, Maya. We built the entire maze around her, with her own chosen rat leading her directly to the cheese, or, in this case, the deletion software. He paused, letting the full weight of it sink in. She paid him a hefty sum tonight to wipe the servers. That money is already flagged, by the way. What she doesn't know is that a significant portion of his fee was actually our money, funneled through a few shell accounts to secure his cooperation and ensure he played his part perfectly. He even got to keep her dirty money as a bonus, a little poetic justice. I was speechless, a rare occurrence. The sheer audacity, the brilliant foresight of it all, Victoria so convinced of her own superior. Intellect and my supposed brokenness had been played like a Stradivarius from start to finish by the very people she disdained. So all that footage of her tonight, I finally managed. Her ordering the wipe, Finch having a meltdown, her delightful little monologue about me being too fragile. It's not just on the courthouse system backup you grabbed. Ronnie was essentially live streaming his desktop to you and to a few very secure encrypted cloud servers, Marcus confirmed with a satisfied nod. Redundancy is key, my friend. We have irrefutable time-stamped proof of conspiracy, attempted destruction of federal property, obstruction of justice. The works. Her little stunt tonight? That's not just going to lose her custody. That's going to buy her a lovely orange jumpsuit for a good few years. Finch, too, if he doesn't flip, which, knowing Finch, he'll be singing like a canary before sunrise to save his own skin. The weight of it, the sheer, beautiful completeness of Victoria's self-immolation, orchestrated so perfectly by Marcus, with a helping hand from a disgruntled techie, was almost too much to absorb. The hunter had not only become the hunted, but had gleefully impaled herself on her own spear. A wave of exhilaration, so potent it was almost dizzying, washed over me. The relief was immense, but beneath it, a colder, harder satisfaction was taking root. Tomorrow morning, I said softly, more to myself than to Marcus, though he was listening intently, a knowing look in his eyes. She has absolutely no idea what she's walking into, does she? She's going to swan into that courtroom, all powdered and pious, ready to deliver another Oscar-worthy performance of the grieving, wronged woman, the devoted mother. Marcus chuckled. Not a single clue. She'll probably still be trying to figure out how her server glitch plan went so spectacularly wrong. She'll dig her own grave, Maya, live on camera, and then she'll try to blame the shovel on you. I pictured it, Victoria on the stand, under oath, her voice dripping with carefully rehearsed sincerity as she'd inevitably begin her litany of lies. Maya is unstable, Your Honor. She's prone to episodes. She imagines things. This evidence she claims to have is undoubtedly another fabrication, another desperate attempt to harm me, to take my precious Lily away. The judge, Harrison, a man known for his sharp intellect and no-nonsense demeanor, would be listening, his expression unreadable. But I would know, and soon he would know. I could almost see the split screen in my mind. Victoria's earnest, perjuring face on one side, and on the other, a rapid-fire montage of her own recorded words and actions. Victoria huddled with David in the diner, coaching his testimony, the greasy napkin on which she'd scribbled key phrases. Just say she's neglectful, David. Imply she's drinking again. Make them doubt her sanity. Click. Victoria in the server room, her voice sharp with command. Just delete everything from the past 6 months. Make it look like a system glitch. Click. Victoria, her face contorted with arrogance, dismissing Finch's fears. Maya, please. She's too broken, too fragile to fight back properly. She'll be a blubbering, incoherent mess. Click. And then, the pièce de résistance, something I'd found earlier in the evening while Marcus was en route. Something that would not only solidify my custody case, but potentially trigger a whole other criminal investigation into Victoria's finances. Footage from her own charity's internal server backups. Yes, Marcus had managed to get a peek there too, thanks to a very disgruntled former CFO of Victoria's. It showed her authorizing wire transfers from the Lily Sterling Children's Fund directly to offshore accounts. A fund she would undoubtedly reference in court to bolster her image as a philanthropist and doting mother. The irony was so thick, it was practically a solid. She would be testifying about her impeccable character, her selfless devotion to children, all while Judge Harrison would soon be privy to the fact she was embezzling from her own charity, the one named after our daughter. Every lie she uttered would be another nail in her own coffin, cross-referenced in real time, not just by me, but by the man whose opinion was the only one that truly mattered in that room. The cliff she was so blissfully unaware she was approaching wasn't just steep. It was a direct drop into oblivion, and she was sprinting towards it with a smile on her face. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a mixture of cold fury and an almost terrifying sense of impending justice. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about dismantling Victoria's entire empire of lies, piece by piece, in the most public and irrefutable way possible. The elation was a powerful drug, but I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Celebrating now would be like spiking the football on the 50-yard line. Victoria was cornered, yes, but cornered animals were often the most dangerous. And while Marcus had handed me a veritable arsenal of legal weaponry, it still needed to be deployed with precision and impeccable timing. There was one more crucial step I needed to take before Victoria even set foot in that courtroom, before she had a chance to spin one more syllable of her toxic narrative to Judge Harrison unprepared. My mind raced. The 6 a.m. evidence review with Finch and Henderson was one thing, They'd see the diner footage, maybe a snippet of the server room fiasco. But Judge Harrison needed the full, unvarnished truth, the sheer scope of Victoria's criminality before the official hearing began at what, 9 a.m.? He needed to understand that this wasn't just a bitter custody dispute, it was a pattern of calculated, felonious behavior designed to subvert the course of justice itself. He needed to see the embezzlement, the bribery, the conspiracy, all of it, in a calm, controlled environment, away from the courtroom theatrics Victoria was undoubtedly planning. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 1 a.m. My stomach twisted with a fresh wave of nerves, but this time, it was the nerves of a strategist, not a victim. I looked at Marcus, who was watching me with an almost paternal sense of pride. "She thinks she's still playing chess with a pawn," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "She has no idea I'm about to flip the entire board over and declare a new game, one with slightly more serious rules." He nodded slowly. "What's your next move, General?" I took a deep breath. "I need to talk to Judge Harrison. Privately. Before that 6 a.m. review. Before the official hearing. He needs to see this, Marcus. All of this. Not just the snippets for Finch." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Getting an unscheduled ex parte communication with a judge in a contested case hours before a hearing? That's a tall order, Maya, even for you. "I know," I said, already reaching for my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard, searching for a contact number that wasn't listed on the public courthouse directory. "But I have a feeling that when his clerk hears what I have to say, protocol might just take a back seat to judicial imperative." I found it. An after-hours contact for the judge's senior clerk, a woman known for her fierce protection of the judge's time but also for her unshakable integrity. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was bold, possibly reckless. But doing nothing, letting Victoria have even a moment to try and charm or deceive Judge Harrison before he knew the full truth, was a risk I couldn't take. I picked up my phone, my hand surprisingly steady, and dialed the number, the tones echoing in the quiet hum of the security office. The phone rang 3 times, each one stretching into an eternity. Just as I was about to lose my nerve and hang up, a crisp, professional, and distinctly sleepy voice answered. "Henderson, Judge Harrison's chambers. How may I assist you at this ungodly hour?" It was Eleanor, the head clerk. "Perfect." "Miss Henderson, my name is Maya Chen," I began, my voice calm, measured, and conveying an urgency I hoped she couldn't ignore. "I apologize profoundly for the lateness of this call, but I am a party in the Chen-Sterling custody matter scheduled before Judge Harrison tomorrow morning. An extremely serious and time-sensitive issue has arisen, which I believe directly impacts the integrity of that hearing and involves potential ongoing criminal efforts to subvert this court. I understand this is highly unorthodox, but I urgently need to request a brief, private meeting with Judge Harrison in chambers before the scheduled 6 a.m. evidence review. I have irrefutable evidence of felonies being committed by the opposing party that he needs to be made aware of immediately." There was a long pause on the other end, so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, Eleanor's voice, sharp and awake now. "Miss Chen, you are aware that ex-parte communications with the judge are strictly prohibited, especially in a matter as contentious as a custody hearing already underway?" "I am acutely aware, Miss Henderson," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "However, this concerns evidence of witness tampering, conspiracy to destroy evidence sought by this court that was scheduled to be reviewed, and significant financial crimes directly linked to Miss Sterling's character and fitness, which she will undoubtedly misrepresent tomorrow. The evidence I refer to was obtained legally and corroborates the active commission of these crimes, some as recently as a few hours ago within this very courthouse. I believe the nature of this information transcends routine evidentiary matters and speaks to a direct assault on the judicial process itself. If I wait until the hearing, critical context will be missing, and the court may be unknowingly subjected to further perjury." Another pause, shorter this time. I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard in the background. "The judge is already scheduled to see you and Miss Sterling for an emergency evidence review at 6 a.m., Miss Chen. Can this not be addressed then?" "What I need to show him, Miss Henderson," I pressed gently but firmly, "provides the critical framework for that 6 a.m. review. It involves the attempted destruction of the very evidence Meister Finch will be expecting to see, among other, even more serious, ongoing criminal activities. It is imperative for the judge to understand the full scope of Miss Sterling's duplicity before she has an opportunity to address him, even in that preliminary review. This is not about the merits of the custody case itself, but about blatant, multiple felonies designed to defraud this court. I held my breath. This was it. Eleanor sighed, a sound that conveyed both immense weariness and a dawning sense of gravity. Miss Chen, what you are alleging is extraordinarily serious. The judge is, as you can imagine, not accustomed to pre-dawn meetings on a whim. However, she paused again, and I could hear her weighing the risks, the protocols, against the potential for a catastrophic miscarriage of justice. Given the extreme nature of your assertions and your willingness to state them so unequivocally on record, I will do this. I will contact the judge at his home. I will convey the urgency and the fundamental nature of your request. If he agrees to see you, it will be no earlier than 5:30 a.m. in his chambers for no more than 15 minutes. You will bring everything you have. And Miss Chen, her voice became steel, for your sake, this had better be as critical as you claim. Wasting Judge Harrison's time, especially under these circumstances, will have repercussions, I assure you, you do not want to experience. I understand completely, Miss Henderson, I said, a wave of adrenaline-fueled relief, making me slightly lightheaded. Thank you, I will be there. And I assure you, neither you nor the judge will find your time wasted. She didn't reply, simply disconnecting the call with a soft click. I looked at Marcus, my eyes wide. She's going to try. 5:30 a.m., if he agrees. Marcus let out a low whistle. You, Maya Chen, are a force of nature. Now let's make sure that USB drive for his honor is a work of art. The air in Judge Harrison's chambers at 5:30 a.m. was thick with the scent of old books, strong coffee, and the kind of institutional gravity that made you want to speak in hushed tones. The judge himself, already in his robes despite the early hour, looked every bit the seasoned, no-nonsense jurist Eleanor, his clerk, had described. His eyes, sharp and discerning, missed nothing as I stepped forward, a small, unassuming USB drive clutched in my slightly damp palm. This was it, the culmination of months of silent, relentless preparation. Your Honor, thank you for agreeing to see me on such short notice, and at such an unconventional hour, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I understand this is highly irregular, and I wouldn't have presumed upon your time if the matter weren't of the utmost critical importance. I extended the USB drive. This contains the evidence I referred to when I spoke with Miss Henderson. It's extensive, and it paints a picture far more disturbing than a simple custody dispute. Judge Harrison accepted the drive without a word, his gaze unwavering. He gestured towards a visitor's chair, then moved to a secure computer terminal on a credenza, his movements economical and precise. Beyond the events of last night, Your Honor, Miss Sterling's attempt to have the courthouse surveillance data wiped, which I believe my associate, Mr. Marcus Thorne, has already provided a preliminary report onto your clerk. This drive details a consistent and calculated pattern of behavior stretching back many months, sir. I watched as he inserted the drive, his expression unreadable. It includes clear, undeniable footage of Miss Sterling actively coaching multiple witnesses, including my ex-husband, David King, on the specifics of their perjured testimonies for this custody hearing. Furthermore, it contains irrefutable proof of her arranging and making substantial payments, which can only be characterized as bribes, to at least 2 junior court staff members in exchange for confidential information and, let's call it, preferential handling of certain documents related to this case. The judge navigated the file directory I'd meticulously organized, his brow furrowing slightly as he clicked open a folder titled Witness_Coaching_DK. A short, silent video clip began to play. Victoria and David, hunched over a table at the greasy diner, Victoria's animated gestures clearly dictating a narrative. His jaw tightened. After several minutes spent navigating key files I'd flagged in a README document, including snippets of last night's server room fiasco and damning audio logs, Judge Harrison finally looked up, his voice low, resonating with judicial gravity. The air in the chambers suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Miss Chen, he began, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that would make a seasoned liar confess to anything, based on what you've just outlined, and the brief, deeply troubling overview of this material I've undertaken in these few minutes. If this evidence is authenticated, and as comprehensive and damning as you suggest, this is not merely a matter of an acrimonious custody battle escalating out of control. He paused, letting his words hang heavy in the air. This points to an extensive, premeditated, and frankly, breathtaking conspiracy to defraud this court, subvert the course of justice, and obstruct federal investigations on multiple fronts. His gaze didn't waver. Are you fully, and I mean fully, prepared for the significant and far-reaching consequences that will inevitably flow from these incredibly grave allegations, should they be proven in a court of law? Consequences not just for Miss Sterling, but potentially for every individual implicated in these recordings, consequences for the very fabric of this case, and potentially significant personal consequences for you as the catalyst for these revelations. I met his gaze without flinching, the cold knot of fear that had lived in my stomach for 3 years, finally, blessedly absent, replaced by a steely resolve. Completely prepared, Your Honor, I stated, my voice clear and unwavering. I've lived with the personal and professional consequences of Miss Sterling's actions, her lies, and her manipulations for the better part of 3 years. I watched her destroy my career, attempt to alienate my daughter, and systematically try to dismantle my life with a campaign of misinformation. I would not bring this before you now, sir, if I wasn't absolutely certain of its veracity, its critical importance, and if I wasn't prepared to stand by it, whatever may come. I took a steadying breath. And, Your Honor, it is comprehensive. I have meticulously cross-referenced every piece of video and audio with financial records, recovered email communications from shared business servers dating back to my employment at Sterling Industries, and I am in the process of securing sworn affidavits from several individuals who were initially coerced by Miss Sterling, but are now, albeit nervously, willing to cooperate with the authorities. There is irrefutable documentation for every payoff I alleged, verbatim transcripts of every instance of witness coaching, every forged signature on documents that have previously been submitted to this very court as truth. The weight of those carefully gathered proofs felt like an armor around me. Judge Harrison leaned back in his large leather chair, his fingers forming a steeple beneath his chin as he studied me intently. The silence in the chamber stretched, thick with unspoken implications and the ghosts of Victoria's many transgressions. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked with solemn authority, each second feeling like an eternity. This is a staggering litany of alleged malfeasance, Miss Chen, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral, yet edged with something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it skepticism or dawning horror? You speak of months of surveillance footage, damning audio logs, intricate financial trails, bribery of court officials, coaching of witnesses for perjury. Evidence of this nature, particularly video and audio recordings captured within the supposedly secure confines of the courthouse itself or from private meetings, this is not easily nor often legally come by for a private citizen embroiled in a civil dispute. His gaze sharpened, becoming even more probing. It wasn't accusatory, but it was the clear, incisive questioning of a jurist needing to understand the absolute bedrock of such explosive, potentially case-altering claims before proceeding an inch further. And you obtained all of this. How exactly, Miss Chen? You mentioned some elements were legally obtained, which I appreciate. But the sheer scope you're describing, especially the intimate footage of Miss Sterling apparently orchestrating these conspiracies, or the recordings from within restricted courthouse areas. He let the question hang in the air, the implication crystal clear. Was this fruit of a poison tree? Had I, in my quest for justice, employed illegal means that would render this entire mountain of evidence inadmissible and potentially expose myself to prosecution? This was the pivot point. That, Your Honor, is the absolute crux of the matter, and precisely why I felt it was so imperative to speak with you privately before any formal presentation of this evidence, I replied, meeting his intense scrutiny with a calm I hoped conveyed utter conviction. 18 months ago, following a rather significant confidential financial settlement related to the targeted and malicious destruction of my professional career by Miss Sterling, a settlement she only agreed to because the alternative was public exposure of her initial fraudulent activities, I made a series of strategic, long-term investments. I paused, letting him absorb that before delivering the key. My primary investment, made through a carefully structured holding company, was the controlling interest in, and subsequently the outright purchase of, a company called Courthouse Secure Solutions, LLC. As you may or may not be aware, CSS LLC is the sole contracted security and surveillance systems provider for this entire courthouse complex and several other federal and state buildings in this district. Judge Harrison's eyebrows, which had been steadily drawing downwards into a formidable line of judicial sternness, shot upwards in undisguised astonishment. "Are you telling me, Miss Chen?" he said slowly, disbelief warring with dawning comprehension in his voice, "that you, a litigant in a case before this court, own the company that provides and monitors this courthouse's entire security apparatus?" "Yes, Your Honor," I confirmed, a small, almost involuntary smile touching my lips. It felt good, so incredibly good, to finally say it aloud to someone in his position. As the beneficial owner, I initiated, through the proper corporate channels and with full board approval, a comprehensive system-wide upgrade well over a year ago. This was for legitimate business reasons, improving image clarity for evidentiary purposes, significantly increasing data retention capabilities, and expanding surveillance coverage to eliminate blind spots and thereby prevent issues such as, well, precisely like unauthorized after-hours attempts to access and delete server data. I let that sink in. All the footage and audio obtained from within the courthouse perimeter, including the server room incident involving Miss Sterling and her associates last night, as well as the various recordings of court staff being inappropriately approached or witnesses being coached in offices or meeting rooms on these premises, was recorded legally on my company's state-of-the-art equipment on property where CSS LLC is explicitly contracted and authorized to provide comprehensive surveillance. Therefore, legally, it is my company's proprietary data. The off-site recordings, such as those capturing Miss Sterling meeting with my ex-husband, Mr. King, were obtained by licensed, bonded private investigators, operating strictly within all applicable state and federal laws regarding surveillance in public places. I could see a new light dawning in Judge Harrison's eyes. The look of a man who has just been handed not just a smoking gun, but the entire ballistics report, the shooter's confession, and a detailed map of how the bullets were manufactured. I pressed my advantage, gesturing towards a specific, brightly colored folder icon on the USB drive directory displayed on his monitor. And that, Your Honor, brings me to perhaps the most personally repugnant aspect of this entire sordid affair, and the direct financial engine that has been funding much of this elaborate conspiracy. My voice, despite my best efforts, dripped with a touch of the contempt I felt. Miss Sterling will undoubtedly, and at great sanctimonious length, speak later today during the hearing about her extensive charitable work, specifically with an organization she founded called the Lily Sterling Children's Fund. She will use it, as she always does, to attempt to demonstrate her unimpeachable moral character and profound maternal devotion. I took a breath. The evidence contained in that highlighted folder, Your Honor, includes meticulously verified financial records, internal memoranda, and offshore wire transfer confirmations from that very charity. This information was legally obtained via a protected whistleblower, a former senior accountant at the fund, who approached my legal team several weeks ago with credible and deeply disturbing allegations of financial impropriety by Miss Sterling. Judge Harrison leaned even further forward, his earlier sternness now tinged with a palpable sense of judicial outrage. "And these records purport to show what precisely, Miss Chen?" he asked, his voice a low growl. "They don't just purport, Your Honor. They irrefutably prove a systematic and ongoing pattern of large-scale embezzlement," I stated, the words cold and hard. "Miss Sterling has been systematically siphoning substantial six-figure sums annually from the Lily Sterling Children's Fund money explicitly donated for the welfare of underprivileged and critically ill children, directly into a series of covertly controlled offshore accounts. Our forensic accountants, working with the whistleblower's initial data, have already traced a significant portion of those embezzled funds directly back to covering the under-the-table payments for individuals like my ex-husband for his perjured testimony, for Mr. Finch's more unconventional legal disbursements, and indeed for the exorbitant consultation fee demanded by Mr. Ronnie Rollins, the technician Miss Sterling hired to attempt to wipe your courthouse servers clean last night. I let the full horror of that statement settle in the quiet chambers. She has been using money stolen from dying children, Your Honor, to fund her campaign of lies, bribery, and evidence tampering against me, and by extension, against this very court. A profound, heavy silence descended upon the chambers, broken only by the relentless, indifferent ticking of the grandfather clock. Judge Harrison sat back, his face a mask of granite. He looked from the USB drive, still blinking innocuously in his computer's port, to me, his expression a complex mixture of shock, grim understanding, and the profound weight of judicial responsibility. For a long moment, he said nothing, simply absorbing the sheer magnitude of Victoria's treachery. Finally, he spoke, his voice resonating with a cold, hard authority that brooked no argument. "Miss Chen," he said, his gaze locking onto mine, "the implications of what you have presented to me this morning are extraordinarily far-reaching, to say the absolute G_D damned least. They extend far beyond the confines of your custody dispute." He rose slowly from his chair, a towering figure of judicial power. "I will review this material in its entirety immediately. The 6 a.m. evidence review with opposing counsel, Mr. Finch, and the mediator, Mr. Henderson, will proceed as scheduled, but its nature, its scope, and its immediate outcome may be significantly altered by what I am about to confirm on this device." He paused, his eyes holding mine. "You should prepare yourself, Miss Chen. Today is likely to be a very different and very long day in court than anyone, least of all Miss Sterling, could have possibly anticipated." "Thank you, Your Honor," I managed, my voice little more than a whisper. "That is all I ask." He gave a curt nod, a silent dismissal. The clock on the wall showed 5:58 a.m. The public hearing was scheduled to start in just over 30 minutes. I walked out of his chambers on legs that felt surprisingly steady, a fragile sense of hard-won victory settling within me. It was the calm before the storm, the deep breath before the plunge. Victoria, at this very moment, was probably adding the finishing touches to her makeup, practicing her tearful, heartfelt lines, completely and utterly oblivious that her entire world, her meticulously constructed facade of lies and deceit, had just been rendered to digital dust on a USB drive in Judge Harrison's private chambers. The impending courtroom drama felt almost anticlimactic now. The true verdict, it seemed, had already been delivered. The air in courtroom 3B was thick enough to be a physical presence, a suffocating blanket of anticipation and dread. Every seat in the public gallery was filled, a testament to the whispers that had undoubtedly slithered through the courthouse corridors following the unscheduled, early morning evidence reviews. Victoria, seated beside a visibly sweating Finch, was a study in feigned composure, her posture ramrod straight, her expression carefully neutral. She probably thought whatever I'd shown Henderson and Finch at 6 a.m. was a bluff, a desperate last-ditch effort she could easily swat away. She had no idea Judge Harrison had already seen the main event in private, the director's cut of her downfall. I sat beside Marcus, who gave my hand a reassuring squeeze under the table. My heart was a trapped bird against my ribs, but my resolve was a column of steel. This was it. Judge Harrison entered, and the customary "all rise" felt more portentous than usual. He settled into his high-backed chair, his gaze sweeping over the courtroom, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on Victoria, then on me. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum into which he dropped his first bombshell. "Before we proceed with scheduled testimonies in the matter of Chen versus Sterling pertaining to the custody of Lily Chen Sterling," Judge Harrison began, his voice resonating with quiet authority, "this court has reviewed extensive and deeply disturbing preliminary evidence presented by both parties in chambers earlier this morning." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Certain grave issues have come to light which necessitate immediate and public address before any further consideration of the custody arrangement itself. These issues bear directly upon the integrity of these proceedings and the conduct of the parties involved." He gestured towards the large video monitors positioned for jury viewing, though no jury was present for this family court matter. We will now view specific surveillance material obtained directly from this courthouse's own security system, recordings made within the last 12 to 24 hours and from previous months. A collective intake of breath rippled through the gallery. Victoria's carefully constructed mask flickered, a tiny muscle twitching near her eye. Finch looked down at his legal pad as if hoping a sinkhole would swallow him whole. The main courtroom screen flickered to life. The first images were from the server room corridor. Victoria, Finch, and Ronnie, the technician, their movements furtive, their expressions tense. Then, the scene inside the server room itself. The audio was crystal clear, amplified through the courtroom speakers. Victoria's impatient pacing, Finch's nervous fidgeting, Ronnie's technical jargon. And then, her voice, sharp and arrogant, filled the stunned silence of courtroom 3B. I don't give a damn about everything, Ronnie. Focus your efforts on the primary surveillance archives. I want you to delete everything from the past 6 months. Make it look like a catastrophic system glitch. The recording continued, capturing her dismissal of Finch's concerns, her chillingly confident assertion. And as for Maya, please. That girl is a walking emotional wreck. She's too broken, too fundamentally fragile to fight back properly. She'll be a blubbering, incoherent mess by that 6 a.m. meeting, mark my words. This is simply tying up a loose end. Victoria stared at the screen, her face transforming from composure to a ghastly shade of pale, her eyes wide with dawning, unadulterated horror. It was as if she was watching her own ghost confess to a crime. A low murmur swept through the gallery. Finch had his head in his hands. I kept my expression carefully neutral, my gaze fixed on Victoria, watching the precise moment her carefully constructed world began to shatter. The recorded voice was undeniably hers, imperious, contemptuous, and utterly damning. This wasn't just a smoking gun, this was a live-fire torpedo strike directly into the heart of her credibility. Finch, jolted from his stupor by the raw exposure of their conspiracy, leaned over to Victoria, his hand urgently gripping her arm, his whisper a hoarse, frantic hiss, clearly audible in the shocked silence that followed the video clip. Victoria, for God's sake, this is a catastrophe. We need to request an immediate recess. We have to strategize, try to mitigate this. I told you this was too risky. I warned you about overconfidence, about underestimating her. There must be an explanation, a way to spin this. But we need time. His voice was a high-pitched whine of pure panic, his eyes darting wildly between Victoria, the implacable Judge Harrison, and the damning images still frozen on the screen. He looked like a cornered rat desperately seeking an escape route that no longer existed. He was right, of course, it was a disaster for them, but the time for strategy, for spin, for anything other than a full and groveling confession had long since passed. They were caught, red-handed and red-faced, in the act of trying to defraud the very court they now faced. His frantic tugging on her sleeve seemed almost comical, a desperate plea to rewind time, a plea that was about to be violently and very publicly denied. Victoria, however, was not one to go down without a fight, no matter how ludicrous or self-destructive that fight might be. She shook off Finch's restraining hand with a violent shrug, her face, moments before ashen, now flushing a dangerous, mottled red. She surged to her feet, her chair scraping backwards with a jarring shriek that echoed her own internal unraveling. No, absolutely not, she shrieked, her voice shrill, cracking with a potent combination of panic and indignant fury. Her eyes, wide and wild, fixed on Judge Harrison. This is a monstrous fabrication, a complete and utter preposterous fabrication, Your Honor. I implore you, none of this is real. It cannot be. She gestured wildly at the screen, then at me, her finger trembling as she pointed. She has manipulated this evidence. That is not my voice, not truly. Those images are doctored, twisted, taken out of context. Maya Chen has orchestrated this entire malicious charade. She is a master manipulator, a technological saboteur. She has done this to destroy me. Her carefully crafted composure had not just cracked, it had exploded, leaving raw, unfiltered, and increasingly unhinged desperation in its wake. It was quite the performance, almost convincing in its sheer audacity, if one hadn't just witnessed her coolly ordering the commission of multiple felonies. Judge Harrison regarded Victoria's outburst with an expression of glacial froideur. He allowed her tirade to exhaust itself, the echoes of her accusations hanging in the suddenly very still courtroom. When she finally paused for breath, her chest heaving, he leaned forward, his voice cutting through the charged atmosphere like a scalpel. "Miss Sterling," he began, his tone dangerously soft, dangerously controlled. "Let me be perfectly clear. Are you formally alleging, in open court and on the record, that this court's own internal security system, the very system that protects this federal building, its occupants, its data, and the sanctity of its proceedings, has been compromised? Are you further alleging that its digital recordings, generated and stored within that secure system, have been nefariously altered, doctored, or fabricated by Miss Chen to falsely incriminate you?" He paused, letting the weight of his question sink in, his gaze unwavering and unblinking. Then, with the precision of a master swordsman delivering a final fatal thrust, he added, "And are you, by extension, Miss Sterling, suggesting that the detailed logs and irrefutable footage of your own person, accompanied by your legal counsel, Mr. Finch, and a third party, making an unauthorized entry into the courthouse server room late last night with the clear and explicitly stated intent to illicitly erase specific data from that very system, an act also captured in its entirety by that same supposedly compromised security system, is also a fabrication orchestrated by Miss Chen?" The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Victoria stared at him, trapped, the implications of his questions, of her own reckless denials, crashing down upon her. Victoria, realizing perhaps that accusing the entire courthouse security apparatus of being a tool in my alleged vendetta was a tactical misstep of monumental proportions, seemed to deflate slightly, but her desperation quickly found a new, more personal target. Her voice, though still laced with panic, shifted from outright denial of the evidence itself to a venomous, full-throated attack on my character. "What I am saying, Your Honor," she spat, her eyes blazing with a potent cocktail of hatred and terror as she turned her venomous gaze fully upon me, "is that Maya Chen is a pathologically vindictive, obsessive, and deeply disturbed liar who will stop at absolutely nothing to destroy me, to tear my life apart, and to alienate my daughter from me. She has been plotting this assassination of my character for years, ever since I had to make the painful decision to remove her from a position of responsibility at Sterling Industries due to her own incompetence and instability." The audacity of her rewriting history was breathtaking. She's twisted everything, manipulated everyone. This entire proceeding, every piece of her so-called evidence, is the culmination of her sick, twisted vendetta. She is capable of anything, Your Honor, to ruin my reputation and inflict pain. She wants to see me suffer. She wants to take Lily not out of love, but out of spite. Her voice cracked dramatically, and tears, whether real or crocodile, it was impossible to tell with Victoria, began to stream down her face, a grotesque parody of genuine maternal grief. "She is the manipulator here, not I!" Judge Harrison listened to Victoria's impassioned, if increasingly unhinged diatribe, with an expression of stony patience. When she finally wound down, her accusations hanging like toxic fumes in the air, he didn't immediately respond. Instead, he calmly gestured to the court technician. "Please play Exhibit B7, he instructed, his voice devoid of inflection. "Audio overlay with synchronized transcript, if you please." The screen flickered again. This time, it was a different scene, an audio recording accompanied by a scrolling transcript. The setting, I knew, was a clandestine meeting Victoria had held with David, my ex-husband, in a dimly lit corner of a cafe, captured by the private investigator I'd hired months ago. Victoria's voice, unmistakable and chillingly clear, filled the courtroom once more. Victoria, on audio. "David, darling, it's really quite simple. You just need to emphasize her instability during your testimony. The more unhinged she sounds, the more erratic her behavior appears, the better it is for our case, for Lily's sake. Suggest she's been drinking again, that she's prone to these dark moods. Question her fitness, heavily. And remember," her voice dropped to a conspiratorial, almost seductive purr, "there's a rather substantial bonus in it for you if we win this custody battle outright. Enough to make all your little financial inconveniences disappear." The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Harrison turned his gaze back to Victoria, who looked as if she'd been physically struck. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice still dangerously quiet, "even if this court were to entertain, for one fleeting hypothetical moment, your increasingly fantastical accusations that Miss Chen is some sort of diabolical puppet master capable of fabricating hours of high-definition video and audio evidence from within this courthouse's secure systems. How then do you explain your own voice, your own image on these recordings?" He gestured to the screen, then back to the evidence of her coaching David. "Recordings made in public places by licensed investigators clearly and unequivocally documenting you discussing the destruction of evidence, the bribery of individuals like Mr. King, and the systematic subornation and coaching of witnesses to commit perjury before this very court. Are you now suggesting that Miss Chen also somehow fabricated those extensive conversations, those detailed plans, in your own unmistakable voice, discussing strategies that align perfectly with the attempts we've already seen to tamper with evidence here today? Or perhaps Mr. King is also part of this grand conspiracy against you?" Victoria stared first at the now blank screen, then at Judge Harrison, then at me, her face a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Disbelief, fury, dawning panic, and finally, a chilling, horrifying comprehension. The carefully constructed walls of her deceptions were not just crumbling, they were imploding, live, in open court, under the unwavering gaze of the law. The fight visibly drained out of her, her shoulders slumping, her earlier defiance evaporating like mist in a harsh sun. She opened her mouth, then closed it, a small, strangled sound escaping her throat. I, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper now, stripped of all its earlier bravado. It's all taken out of context. I was under enormous duress. She trapped me. She set me up." But the words were hollow, rote, the desperate, reflexive gasps of a drowning woman who knew finally that the tide had overwhelmed her. She had just, in her panicked attempt to deny the undeniable and shift blame, effectively confessed to the core of the conspiracy, validating the authenticity of the recordings by her very act of trying to explain them away with such flimsy, self-serving excuses. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had, in front of a judge and a packed courtroom, become the star witness for her own prosecution. At a subtle, almost imperceptible nod from Judge Harrison, I calmly reached into my briefcase and retrieved the master USB drive, the one containing the full, unexpurgated symphony of Victoria's deceit. It was a small, innocuous thing, yet it held the weight of 3 years of pain, planning, and the relentless pursuit of truth. As the bailiff approached, I handed it to him. "Bailiff," I said, my voice clear and steady, easily carrying in the now pin-drop silent courtroom. "This is a comprehensive evidentiary submission. It contains all original unedited recordings, detailed financial documentation, data logs, and sworn affidavits referenced by both myself and Judge Harrison this morning. It irrefutably corroborates Miss Victoria Sterling's calculated 3-year campaign of character assassination, fraud, harassment, evidence tampering, bribery of court officials, subornation of perjury, and embezzlement from a children's charity for the court's permanent record." The bailiff took the drive and presented it to the court clerk, another nail, this one a 10-penny spike, hammered firmly into Victoria's legal coffin. The tangible proof of her reign of terror was now officially entered. Judge Harrison surveyed the courtroom, his gaze sweeping over a stunned Victoria, a visibly shattered Finch, and a gallery that seemed to be collectively holding its breath. He adjusted his robes, a small, deliberate movement that signaled the impending pronouncement. When he spoke, his voice was devoid of all emotion save the cold, hard weight of judicial authority. "This court," he began, each word precise and unequivocal, "has reviewed extensive and deeply disturbing evidence, both in chambers this morning and presented publicly here today. The breadth and audacity of the attempts to mislead this court, to tamper with evidence, to suborn underscore perjury, and to obstruct justice are, frankly, unparalleled in my tenure on this bench." He paused, his gaze fixing on Victoria. "Regarding the immediate matter before us, the custody of the minor child, Lily Chen Sterling, based on the overwhelming and irrefutable evidence of Miss Victoria Sterling's repeated and egregious attempts to subvert this court through illegal and immoral means, her systematic commission of perjury, her active participation in witness tampering and bribery, her disturbing lack of ethical conduct, and a clear, undeniable pattern of behavior demonstrating a profound absence of moral fitness and a flagrant willingness to place her own vindictive and criminal interests far above that of the child. This court finds Miss Victoria Sterling to be a demonstrably unfit parent at this time. A gasp went through the courtroom. Victoria swayed on her feet. Therefore, Judge Harrison continued, his voice like the nario senyun pansai mangchi sori, sound of a judge's gavel striking. Sole legal and physical custody of Lily Chen Sterling is hereby awarded to her mother, Miss Maya Chen, effective immediately. Tears pricked my eyes, tears of relief, of vindication, of an exhaustion so profound it was almost debilitating. Marcus squeezed my arm again, his own eyes shining. Furthermore, the judge went on, his tone hardening further, given the credible, extensive, and frankly shocking evidence of widespread criminal activity presented and corroborated before this court, including, but not limited to, conspiracy to obstruct justice, felony evidence tampering, bribery of public officials, subornation of perjury, and significant embezzlement from a registered charitable fund. This court is immediately referring this entire matter, along with all submitted evidence and transcripts of these proceedings, to the District Attorney's Office for the relevant state charges, and to the United States Attorney's Office and the Federal Bureau of Investigation for investigation and prosecution of all applicable federal offenses by Miss Victoria Sterling and any and all co-conspirators, including but not limited to Mr. Alastair Finch and Mr. Ronald Rollins. Finch made a choked sound and sank further into his chair, his face the color of old parchment. Finally, Judge Harrison concluded, his gaze sweeping one last time over Victoria, a permanent restraining order with extreme prejudice is hereby issued against Miss Victoria Sterling. This order prohibits any and all contact, direct or indirect, through any means whatsoever, with Miss Maya Chen and the minor child, Lily Chen Sterling, outside of professionally supervised therapeutic visitation with Lily if, and only if, deemed appropriate by both Child Protective Services and a subsequent specific court order pending the full outcome of the aforementioned criminal investigations and any subsequent incarceration. He struck his gavel. This hearing is adjourned. Miss Sterling, Mr. Finch, you will remain in this courtroom. Bailiffs, please ensure compliance. Two stern-faced bailiffs moved to flank Victoria and a now openly weeping Finch. As Victoria was turned, her face a mask of incandescent rage and utter defeat, her eyes met mine across the courtroom. The hatred in that final glare was a palpable force, a silent, chilling promise that even though this battle was decisively, catastrophically lost for her, this war, in her mind, was far from over.